SoC chips are basically tiny all-in-one computers, squeezing the CPU, memory, and other key parts into a single self-contained package, so the whole thing works as a standalone system. Instead of relying on lots of separate components on a big circuit board, everything lives together on one chip, which helps save space, cut power use, and usually makes devices thinner and more efficient. This is why phones, tablets, and many smart gadgets lean so heavily on SoCs. They pack a lot of compatibility into a very compact, self-contained design. For SoCs, the best security approach is to bake protection right into the chip instead of bolting on extra hardware later. Each SoC gets its own unique cryptographic keys, which act like a one-of-a-kind ID and power strong authentication and data protection for that specific device. Those keys live in dedicated security logic on the silicon itself, so sensitive operations stay on chip, and you're not depending on separate security modules that can be harder to manage or secure. So again, SoC is already a self-contained system with its own built-in security, so adding a TPM on top of that becomes unnecessary redundancy in this specific context. So in other words, since the SoC can already handle key storage and platform integrity on its own, using a separate TPM does not really add meaningful security here and mostly just complicates the design. A self-encrypting drive is basically a storage device that quickly encrypts and decrypts everything on the disk by itself without needing the CPU to do the heavy lifting. This is great for laptops or servers with traditional drives, but in this SoC setup, there is no separate drive to plug that into. So drive-centric encryption does not line up with how the hardware is built. In this context, using an SED would be like buying a super secure lock for a door that does not exist. It is a solid technology, just not relevant to this particular design. BIOS protection is all about locking down the firmware that runs when a traditional PC first powers on, making sure the boot process has not been tampered with. That works great for classic desktops and server hardware, but many SoC platforms don't even use legacy BIOS, instead relying on their own custom bootloaders and firmware flows. Because of that, turning on BIOS protection is not really an option here. The security has to be built into those SoC specific boot mechanisms rather than borrowed from old school PC BIOS features.